In chapter 6, we talk about the three types of learning. We have non associative, which is learning about a stimulus such as a sight or a sound in an external world. And in non associative, there is habitation and sensation. Habitation is when our behavior responds to a stimulus increases, and sensitization is when our behavior responds to a stimulus increases. Then we have associative learning, learning the relationship between two pieces of information. So there's classical conditioning and operant conditioning. So when we learn that a stimulus predicts another stimulus, and an operant conditioning is when we learn that a behavior leads to a certain outcome. Then we talk about watching others. So learning by watching how others behave. There's observational learning when we learn or change a behavior after watching a person engage in that behavior. Modeling is displaying a behavior that imitates a previously observed behavior. Then there is vicarious conditioning, so learning to engage in a behavior or not after seeing others being rewarded or punished for performing that action. A personal example I like to use to talk about habitation and sensitization. So habitation, in the picture, there's a house next to a train, and so they're probably really used to always hearing a train horn, and that's habitation. But if there's someone new living there, it's sensation because they're not used to that, and the sound of the train is more noticeable than the person that's been living there for 5 years. So when we talk about classical conditioning, a big example that is always used is the dog with the food and the bell. So before conditioning, the dog drools over the food, but when it hears the sound of a bell on its own, it doesn't drool. But when you condition the bell to the bowl of food, then that's the condition. And then after conditioning, when the dog hears the bell, since the bell is now associated with the food, it will now drool to the sound of the bell. So understanding classical conditioning, you have to know the words. So when you see uncontrolled stimulus, please think of stimulus that is not learned. So meaning something that instinctively prompts a reaction. So example, the food. So when you see food, you drool. All right. So uncontrolled response is think of a response that is not learned. So a reaction that is elect that you kind of just make it when you see something. So I kind of messed up what I said before. So the uncontrolled stimulus is just the food, and the uncontrolled response is when you drool to the food. And then conditioned stimulus is stimulus that is learned. So something that prompts a reaction only after learning has occurred. So example, the McDonald arches, so the McDonald's sign. And the controlled response is response that is learned, reaction that is elicited only after learning has occurred. So now whenever I see the McDonald's sign, I drool. So that's kind of what it all means. Now we're going to talk about operant conditioning, so a learning process in which an action consequence determines how likely an action is to be performed. So children learn the effects of their actions. So if you eat your spinach, then you'll get dessert. Or after I finish this chapter, I'll watch that YouTube clip. Okay, another dog example about operant conditioning. So number 1, if you're trying to teach your dog to surf, you first reward the dog for approaching the surfboard. Then you reward the dog for getting on the surfboard and standing there. Then you reward the dog for continuing to stand on the board as the waves move. And then fourth, as the dog learns that the behavior is being reinforced, it eventually learns to produce the desired behavior. Surfing! Okay, so moving on to chapter 7, we're going to studying memory. So memory refers to the persistence of learning over time through the storage and retrieval of information and skills. 3 behaviors show that memory is functioning. First is recall. It is an agalogous to fill in the blank. You retrieve information previously learned and unconsciously stored. Second is recognition. It is a form of multiple choice to identify which stimuli match your stored information. 3 is relearning. Relearning is a measure of how much less work it takes you to learn information and you had studied before, even if you don't recall having seen the information before. So now we're going from stimuli to short-term memory. Some of the stimuli we encounter are picked up by our senses and processed by the sensory organs. This generates information which enters sensory memory. Before this information vanishes from sensory memory, we select details to pay attention to and send this information into working memory for rehearsal or other processing. And now we're going to talk about emotions and memory. So, strong emotions, especially stress, can strengthen memory information. Flashbulb memories refer to emotionally intense events that become burned in as vivid seeming memories. Note that flashbulb memories are not as accurate as they feel. Vividly storing information about dangers may have helped our ancestors survive. So, an example of this that's in the picture is asking someone where you were during 9/11. So, since I wasn't alive during 9/11, something I think about is where I was when I found out Michael Jackson died. I was in Mexico in a truck, and you can ask anybody, they'll be like, "Okay, that's it for 6 and 7." Woo!